If you're familiar with horror games, then you undeniably recognize how diverse they can be. The diversity can be seen from multiple sides, like the environment, which can change from a haunted house where something terrible happened, to empty dark woods where you can't even figure out how you can escape. Or in other cases, it can be the concept. Some games focus on forcing you to escape and hide from visible, frightening creatures, while other ones rely more on playing with your mind by convincing you that there's something lurking in the darkness while there's nothing that can actually be spotted by your eyes. However, what makes indie horror games even more unique is that the diversity of the countries that they originate from can also contribute to providing different experiences with many backgrounds and themes that are distinct from each other. Every country has its own folklore, customs, and incredible tales that are usually related to its culture and history, which makes us even more interested in the stories because they feel like they're actually connected to real people and real-life traditions. And that's exactly what made me excited to make this video, because today we're going to showcase 10 different horror games that were created in 10 different countries located in different regions. These countries have their own style and perception of how horror should be comprehended, but they definitely go hand in hand when it comes to pushing us to the limits and making us realize that fear can be felt in countless ways. But before we start the list, I want to make it completely clear that the ranking is completely random and not based on certain preferences, which means that number 1 is not necessarily better than number 10 and vice versa. Because the ultimate goal for me is to explain the outlandish aspects of each title and how it can be something you should probably check out.
Mày có thiếu tiền đâu mà chui cái chỗ sập sệ như thế nhỉ?
Nhà đó có ma ám đấy, cháu phải cẩn thận. Bác nghe nói nhà đó ngày trước có nhiều người chết lắm.
Cách đây 20 năm, toàn bộ 3 người trong nhà đấy đã chết một cách rất là bí ẩn. Sớm mà chuyển đi nơi khác đi, tao thấy nơi này không ổn đâu.
Sao không anh nghe?
Đi.
The Death is a psychological horror game released in 2022 and developed by 3 Vietnamese developers from a small indie studio. But despite being their first project, it's actually an interesting and impressive experience that deserves attention. The story starts in an intense way, where you find yourself encountering some unexplainable paranormal activities, including a chamber glowing in a red light from which you don't know its source, the body of a mysterious girl being dragged before disappearing, and doors opening and shutting as if the place is about to fall apart. But apparently, it's all part of the hallucinations of the protagonist. The game puts you in the shoes of a young man who is looking to rent a room in a supposedly haunted house. However, upon approaching the place, strangers warn him against going there. To add to the unease, he experiences surreal and nightmarish visions at the house's gate, which should be enough to dissuade him from renting there. But despite all that, he decides to go in. Once you're inside, you will need to spend quite some time searching for various items in this house, such as dolls and human teeth. Even though the jump scares may break your immersion sometimes, the game's environment will keep you engaged, especially because it's meticulously crafted with attention to the smallest particulars. The beautifully rendered rooms are a sight to behold, and although the game has a dark atmosphere, there are some moments that are incredibly satisfying to the eye. It kind of offers a refreshing break from the poorly decorated and generic houses that are common in these types of horror games. Beside all that, the classic Vietnamese music in the background also makes your playthrough unique and very suitable for the setting where the events are taking place, which is the actual city of Hanoi in Vietnam. So, if you're looking for a scary Asian experience that's combined with real-life traditions and folklore, then you should keep this one on your list.
Ông dám đánh tôi à? Đồ vô phụ, rồi ông không phải hối hận.
Home Sweet Home was one of the most popular indie horror releases of 2017, and I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with it. But I personally chose the second installment for this list because I feel that it focuses more on Thai folklore and mythology, which aligns very well with the purpose of today's video and makes mentioning the country of the game very important. Anyway, Home Sweet Home Episode 2 is a continuation of the story from the first game. You'll play as Tim, the protagonist who has been searching for his missing wife for some time, but has yet to uncover any clues. One day, he wakes up in a mysterious forest and senses that he may have stumbled upon some information about his wife's disappearance. And to learn more, Tim decides to venture further into this unfamiliar territory. Nevertheless, the situation is not as easy as it seems. The protagonist will soon find himself surrounded by villagers who exhibit peculiar behavior, possibly due to the influence of an evil spirit and a hidden Thai dancer. But escaping is not an option here. So, in order to stay alive and uncover the whereabouts of his wife, Tim must venture further into the forest while avoiding the malevolent forces lurking within. The game contains several unique features compared to the first installment, and you will discover a spine-chilling realm that draws inspiration from Thai culture and legends as you embark on a thrilling adventure. With a range of weapons at your disposal, you can now take on the malevolent spirits that are relentlessly pursuing you. Each encounter is a delicate balance between stealth and combat, with multiple enemies to confront at once, and you also need to use your investigative skills to analyze mind-bending puzzles that reveal more of the mystery behind Tim's missing wife. Although facing such significant challenges can be daunting, the most wise decision is to avoid them as much as possible. Engaging in direct confrontation will only result in being outnumbered and overpowered. That's why it's advisable to evade your adversaries, remain concealed, and strike only when the opportunity arises. By combining action and stealth tactics, you can increase your chances of survival against these malevolent forces and discover what really happened to your wife. I don't know about your personal taste, but if you're searching for a horror game that mixes combat and hiding mechanics with Asian fantasy, then Home Sweet Home 2 is definitely a title to keep in mind.
Don't you give me that tone, young lady. Have a good look at yourself, would you? Start with the thought that your beauty will get you what you want. If you won't step away from the mirror and practice like Tina, then you would never get anything handed to you for the rest of your life.
I'm the heroine. I'm the number one. Who's ever in my way will die.
Halo Jaka, jadi bagaimana?
Iya, ini sudah tinggal sedikit sih yang harus dibereskan. Tapi rumah ini aneh sekali deh, Kak.
Aneh bagaimana? gimana?
Ya, aneh saja. Perasaan saya tidak enak. Kak, ini semua makin aneh, Kak.
Aneh bagaimana maksudnya?
Saya juga bingung. Bahkan lampunya pun sudah menyala sendiri. Kak, saya ingin pergi saja dari sini. Tapi,
One of the great Indonesian horror games is Dread Out, but it's definitely a game for another day. For me, Pamali is very suitable for today's video for many reasons. One of those reasons is that it's more psychological and enigmatic in a way that leaves you with more questions than answers. It's an Indonesian horror game that takes inspiration from the folklore of Indonesia, and it's set in different Indonesian locations and revolves around supernatural entities and taboos that are deeply ingrained in the local culture. The game is divided into 4 distinct episodes, and each episode has its own unique story and characters. The most memorable chapter is called The White Lady, and in this part, Jaka is the protagonist of the story who returns home after being away for several years in Jakarta, pursuing a career in journalism. Sadly, both of his parents have passed away, and he intends to sell the house to manage his financial situation. Jaka's sister, Nenden, had also passed away before his parents, and sorrowfully, she lost her child days before she died too. The story's narrative is presented in a simple yet artistic way, with various items found in the house, such as letters and diaries, providing further insight into the plot. These discoveries reveal some heart-wrenching details, such as Jaka's absence from his sister's funeral because of his work schedule, and then there's Nenden's emotional state, where she pretended that Jaka's old doll was her baby due to her grief and gloom over the loss of her actual baby. The general theme here is a little bit sad, but the problem is that the protagonist Jaka is known for his carelessness and neglect towards his family. Even when he got back to the family's emptied house, he was being rude and not respectful to his family members' possessions while he was cleaning the place. And that's exactly what this chapter of the game is all about. It's not just about scaring you and sending chills down your spine, but it also wants to teach you a moral lesson about respecting the deceased and also to appreciate your family and prioritize it over expendable stuff like money and a career, because you'll know the value of what you had only when you lose it. And once you lose your family before realizing their value, regret won't help you in any way. The game excels at playing with your mind, and the scares feel very natural and not random, just like something you would expect from a real-life experience where the house appears haunted. But simultaneously, there are no clear signs or ghosts appearing all over the place. Despite the fact that this type of game might be unsuitable for some people, I believe that it's a great option for veteran horror fans who enjoy a good story that's inspired by the real folklore of an Asian country, and, at the same time, psychologically scary too.
sekarang urusan kakak di dunia ini sudah selesai. Semoga kakak bertemu dengan anak kakak yang di dalam sana. Saya harap sekarang kakak bisa pergi dengan tenang.
Adikku, terima kasih.
Over the last few months, I've featured many great polished games on this channel, like Blair Witch and Layers of Fear. But one of the iconic titles that I missed was Darkwood, and gladly, this changes today. Darkwood is a very special experience, not just because of its view angle, but also because of its amazing combination of survival elements and horror without prioritizing certain aspects over others. It's a game that incorporates various systems, including crafting, bartering, and combat. The mechanics are intricate, but the learning curve is reasonable. The controls are well laid out on the pause menu, but mastering some of the seemingly insignificant mechanics can be beneficial in the game's tougher regions. For example, cooking in the sinister ovens grants players skills that provide small advantages, like running without using up stamina. However, there is a catch, and the catch is that every skill you acquire comes with a negative effect, and this effect has an impact on your entire playthrough. But if we put the mechanics aside, I certainly believe that Darkwood's most prominent aspect is definitely its world, which is the most memorable element that will stick in your mind for a while. Most of the time, players are alone and must navigate a gloomy, oppressive forest that is jam-packed with all kinds of terrifying creatures. But the interesting part is that the lethal animals and unrelenting monsters are not what make Darkwood frightening, but discovering things like a ghost wedding or an enigmatic wolfman is what makes the walkthrough a chilling experience that stands out from anything similar. As you progress in the story, you'll discover an area called The Village. This is where a group of crazy people worship a strange pig and call it the mother of all pigs. The majority of the villagers have gone insane, with one of the most dominant residents having developed an unusual attraction to chickens, after locking up her own sister to prevent her from marrying a musician. The villagers do not like outsiders and live in a secluded society, which is really scary. The environment here is getting darker, and this town, which is supposed to be a safe haven, is inevitably going to be lost. As a player observing from the outside, it's even more emotional to witness the village's decline. I'm not going to talk about any more details to avoid spoiling crucial parts of the game in case you didn't play it. But if you want to try a true survival horror experience that's absolutely bizarre in a captivating way, then Darkwood should clearly be on your radar. Mariam is one of the most popular mobile horror games in the last 10 years, but at the same time, it's also one of the most controversial ones. It was created by a Saudi developer, and it tells the story of a Middle Eastern girl from the 18th century who shares a bond with spirits and ghosts. The game's horror aspect stems from its atmospheric and narrative elements rather than excessive noise and weird-looking monsters. And this is honestly one of my favorite types of horror games because it makes things even more dark, suspenseful, and mysterious, which activates your curiosity and urges your mind to think about how this experience will end. But with that being said, the way this game works is basically the controversial part, and frankly, the scariest part as well. Throughout the playthrough, the game asks you about personal information, and when I say personal information, I don't mean some stuff related to the fictional protagonist, but it actually wants you to answer with your own real data. This can include your home's address, your age, your height, and even more detailed stuff like your education level or Facebook account. This would have been a normal thing if it was just about questions that you could reply to with random answers and move on. But the problem is that it has been reported that the game actually has access to several private things on your phone, like your photos and social media accounts. To the extent that the police department in the United Arab Emirates warned people to avoid downloading this game and also urged parents not to allow their children to play it, especially since the game uses your information to mess with your mind and makes you believe that it knows everything about you in a way that reaches the level where you actually get convinced it's haunted, and you need to follow its instructions or else something bad will happen. So that's definitely something you wouldn't want children to experience. Furthermore, many Arab and Western YouTubers who played the game said that it was unusual and creepy, and there's definitely something weird about it. But personally, I don't want to take an exaggerated stance towards it. I acknowledge that it has some bizarre vibes and chilling interactions compared to other mobile horror games, but I think it's mainly to make it more interesting to horror enthusiasts. I mean, let's be honest, most of us love it when the game takes another step toward insanity to confuse us and leave us drowning in our own imagination. But if you have a different opinion, then please don't hesitate to share it with us. Do you believe that it's just a regular game that succeeded in gaining attention with its innovative and unique concept? Or do you believe that it's actually abnormal and there's something spooky behind it? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Nikhaj is an Indian horror game based on a fictional story from Bengali culture. You play as a professor who is interested in solving the mystery of an abandoned school. Rumors have been circulating that the place is haunted and that those who enter it are never seen again. But obviously that's not enough to stop you, because you are determined to prove them wrong and find the truth, not just for yourself, but also for your sister. To achieve that, you need to go and explore the deserted old school, which was built more than 300 years ago in the 18th century. You can interact with a lot of items in the environment that can help you reveal the hidden aspects of the story, and you also have the option to search and investigate in order to solve the mystery. But be careful. You can also risk becoming part of it and join a list of people who went through the same journey before you, which ended with their departure forever. The ambience in the school is very quiet and dark, and you can only hear your own footsteps and a shadowy sound that will only contribute to making you alarmed all the time about something that might show up at any second. Therefore, if you're interested in uncovering the secrets that are hidden inside this infamous school, then make sure to get your heart ready and keep this game in mind. But that's not all. This probably won't be the last Indian horror title featured on this channel, because there's actually another interesting and scary Indian game that's planned to be released soon. It's called Occult Chambers, and it falls under the action horror category. It's played from a third-person perspective and is set in the Himalayas. The story revolves around a guy named Durov, who embarks on a journey to find his missing father. But during the quest, he discovers a dark world of occult practices and mythical creatures inspired by Indian folklore, which will make his mission way harder than he expected. The game really looks promising, and I feel that it relies a lot on exploring dark historical sites with just some fire as a source of light, which is always a good thing in a genuine horror experience. So I'm definitely going to keep a close eye on it until it releases. I don't think this list can be complete without a game from South America. And when it comes to South American games, I definitely can't ignore Phobia, which is also why it was featured in one of my previous videos about the most underrated titles. Phobia Saint Dinfna Hotel is a survival horror game developed by a small Brazilian studio called Pulsatrix, which is really impressive considering that their first project looks this good. The experience is inspired by first-person shooters like Resident Evil 7 and survival franchises like Outlast, where you can use guns to defend yourself and a camera tool to see in the darkness in certain areas. You need to explore a luxurious hotel that spans various time periods, but you're not here to spend a vacation or enjoy the luxury around you, because you'll actually find yourself compelled to delve into the disturbing past of a zealous cult and your involvement in their schemes. The hotel is located in Três Tilhas, which is an actual Brazilian municipality located in the state of Santa Catarina, and the site has been associated with various rumors, which include unexplained disappearances and otherworldly occurrences. And that's exactly what triggered the curiosity of the protagonist Roberto Lopes, an amateur journalist who visited the place to investigate the story after receiving a tip from his friend Stephanie. Your ability to investigate will be crucial here, not just for uncovering the truth, but also for your own survival. You will stumble upon several components that will intensify your challenge and confuse your mind. This can include a fanatical cult, a camera that reveals multiple timelines, experiments on humans, and ghostly apparitions haunting the premises. The only way to survive is to solve puzzles and search for anything that could halt the pursuit of these entities. But what makes the journey even more complex is that the past, present, and future will come crashing together, and your investigative skills will be put to the ultimate test. But I'm pretty sure the first thing that caught your attention about this game was its beautiful visuals and realistic graphics, which is very expected considering that the game was created using Unreal Engine to make the environment look as alive as it can be. The experience is a combination of mystery, stealth, action, and unusual tools like the strange camera that has the ability to connect multiple realities simultaneously, revealing the concealed secrets lying within the walls of the hotel. So in case you want to dive into a world where reality and fiction collide to provide you with an exceptional playthrough, then I think Phobia should be on your wishlist.
Hello, Roberto?
That's it, Stephanie. I'm done listening to you. Finished. You got that?
I can explain.
No, you screwed me.
Girl needs your help.
Holy shit.
Shadow Corridor is a Japanese first-person horror game with a unique and challenging concept. It's set in a dark, atmospheric environment, where you must navigate through a series of corridors filled with shadow creatures and traps, and you need to use a variety of tools and techniques to avoid the danger and progress through the levels. The experience is different because it doesn't rely on traditional horror elements. Instead of that, it creates fear through a sense of anticipation and dread, especially because as you explore the dark corridors armed with only lighter and non-lethal objects, there's no background music to distract you. The overall atmosphere is one of silence, with only the sound of your footsteps echoing through the halls. However, when an evil spirit appears, the situation quickly escalates, intense music dominates the scene, and you must run and hide to survive. I really find these situations terrifying and tend to freeze up, but luckily the game has checkpoints to help you progress. On the other side, jump scares are present here, but they're well executed and never feel overused. Initially, the scares are relatively mild, such as encountering the homeowner or hearing the sound of a cat, but they escalate significantly once you're trapped inside the temple, and you'll probably miss the quiet ambience that gives you some time to take your breath. Exploration is also central to the game, with each map being randomly generated. This means that replaying the game keeps you on your toes, as you'll never encounter the same maze-like hallways or door-locking key puzzles more than one time. Additionally, each level has a timer, which makes it ideal for speedrunners looking for a spooky challenge that can make them feel proud after finishing it. Even though Japan has many great horror games out there, I personally chose this one for this list because it combines Japanese myths and architecture with an engaging horror experience. So you definitely can't miss this one if you want to get some real scares and test your ability to endure stress, while trying to hide and run at the same time.
أعوذ بكلمات الله التامة من شر ما خلق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله. الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء.
Personally, I believe Iblis is one of the few horror games that succeeds in portraying what an actual haunted house should feel like. It's a Turkish horror game that mixes multiple elements that seem like something you would be familiar with in real life, not just in the fictional environment of the playthrough. The story takes place in a secluded house situated in a Turkish village that's renowned for the unusual and unnatural events that happen around it. And the plot revolves around a marriage that didn't go well due to problems between the families. The bride died in a tragic car accident, but apparently her soul never left the place. And it seems that the house has become all hers now, and she wouldn't allow anyone to come in. And that's when your role starts. You play as a religious official who dared to enter the abode so he could investigate if its ghostly reputation is based on reasonable signs or if the locals are just exaggerating. However, after 2 minutes into the game, the suspicion will be replaced by fear and certainty because it's clear that the house is not safe at all. And obviously something or someone is living inside and they're aware of your presence. At this point, there's no coming back and hesitation will get you nowhere. You need to explore every corner and chamber so you can understand what's happening, or at least figure out the past events that led to the current situation. But if you think that you'll spend any time comfortable in the process, then you definitely don't comprehend what you're getting yourself into. With every step you take, you'll encounter different paranormal activities that are meant to make you give up and collapse mentally. You'll see lamps getting turned off on their own, plates falling from the kitchen ceiling in a way that will make your heart skip a beat, feminine screams coming from nowhere without any figure appearing. And you'll also hear music being played with no idea of its source or who used to listen to it. And speaking of songs, I mentioned the last time I featured this game that one of the elements that caught my attention was how realistic its setting and environment were. And I don't particularly mean the visuals or graphics, but the realism is more impressive in the small details, like the classic Turkish song in the background, which is clearly a real song not invented by the developer. And the other impressive details can be seen in the photos on the house walls and in the rooms. They really seem like real photos of actual normal people who used to live in this place a long time ago before it became unlivable, which really makes the experience much more creepier, especially when you realize that the developer stated that the events of the game are actually inspired by a true story that happened in 1993 and was told by a real person who was presented as the protagonist in Iblis. So, if you want to dive into a dark realm of fear and mystery that looks very real, then this game is definitely something to consider.
بسم الله حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل.
This game was featured in one of my videos 2 months ago, but if I have to talk about the best Russian indie horror games ever created, I can't ignore this one, no matter how amazing the other options are. Because this is simply one of the experiences that sticks in your mind for a long time after going through it. From the Darkness has a simple plot, and its simplicity is actually one of the elements that made the events even more powerful and unpredictable. You will find yourself in an apartment complex from the Soviet era, and your job is to enter room number 64 on the 6th floor, which belongs to a mysterious old man who is obviously the protagonist's grandfather. Your main objective is to find an album of photos and leave, but it's not that simple. You will most likely forget about the album a few seconds after entering the flat, because you'll be focused on finding out what's going on inside and if you can get out or not. But let's be honest, you probably knew that it was a bad idea to go in when you saw the note on the front door. Anyway, once you start investigating the apartment, you'll have a weird feeling that you're not alone, or to be more accurate, that you're being watched. The atmosphere here is literally the definition of psychological horror, because this game basically doesn't need to show you any monsters in order to give you a fright. You will have chills going down your spine just by moving around the place and checking out the rooms to understand what's going on. But your paranoia will reach its highest levels when you start experiencing supernatural occurrences that confirm the idea that this apartment is definitely not for a peaceful night's sleep. Besides the flickering lights, you will notice that certain objects have been rearranged if you visit certain areas more than once. And there's also a chamber with a nightmarish ambience that you can't even enter. But the most memorable event that will make you panic is the shadow of a tall, huge figure looking at you before disappearing after you see it. At this very moment, you'll realize that there's no time for messing around anymore, because someone is actually living inside the apartment, and apparently it's not very human. And let's also not forget the fact that the creepy doll in the room is literally following your movements with its eyes, in one of the most disconcerting ways possible. To keep it short and avoid spoiling the experience, this game is simply a masterpiece when it comes to providing the most amount of fright and pressure in a small space. And it literally made me believe that the developer N4BA knows exactly how a good indie horror game should be made, especially since he also created another spooky title called Untitled Street, which was inspired by the real-life story of an infamous Russian man. If you want to learn more about it, then you can check out one of my previous videos, where I talked extensively about the dark actual events that influenced the developer to make that game. This is probably the 50th time the video gets longer than I anticipate, but I think it was worth it. And even though our list for today has reached its end, it's obvious that this can't be the final one for this subject. If you think that your country has a game that should have been featured, then make sure to mention it in the comments so I can understand what I'm missing. There will definitely be a part 2 of this video, and maybe even a part 3, especially since indie developers worldwide are unleashing their talents to provide the best possible horror games by adding their cultural touches to the stories and environments. Until then, stay safe and be ready for what's coming.